probably go over the next 30 minutes or so, and we want to open up the floor for Q&A. But to do that, what we thought would be really interesting would be to combine Katie's perspectives as leading now the engine with Anantha Chandrakasan, who I'm going to invite to come up here. Most of you probably know Anantha. Anantha is MIT's head of the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. He has been a partner in crime in creating the engine's vision and the engine impetus. He is highly involved in how the engine will work and the success of the engine. And more interestingly, he is also leading internally a series of internal working groups that are trying to simplify procedures, make it easier for the MIT students and researchers to become involved with the engine and try to make sure that that handoff, if you will, becomes a model not just for MIT, but for other universities and institutions across the region to work with the engine. So to start off, I'm going to ask Katie and Anantha a couple of questions myself. They'll answer most of those questions, I think, are questions that you may have in your minds, and they'll be answered by them before that. And then we'll open up the floor. And if I could ask you, just come up to the mics. There are 2 mics, one each aisle. State your name and organization, and we'll go from there. So, Katie. Oh, no. Now it's my turn. Can you speak to the kinds of companies you're looking to invest in, and tell us about the next steps in the selection process and what we might expect in terms of timing?
So I think the timing we will start to look at companies almost immediately. By the way, my first day is March 15th. So give me a break until that moment.
Paid day.
That's right, exactly. What I'll do in the beginning is, as I said, I'm already reading everyone who's submitted something to the engine. And the process will be, this is an investment decision, so of course you have to meet people. This isn't I don't fill out just a blind scorecard and decide who to give money to, right? This is a collaborative process where we sit down and we talk about what you're doing, and we talk about the kind of milestones you're trying to achieve, and we figure out, do we think this is a good bet? And do we think we could collaborate well together? And does it fit the kind of dollars that we think about investing into companies? So I'm not being as specific as I could, but it's very much on purpose because every company is really different. I can tell you now that if you think the first checks we're going to write are $10 million checks and you're trying to go for your Series B, that's not where we're starting. We're starting at this real translational stage between science and engineering, and we could probably talk about that for 10 hours. But for things that are really coming out and are making their journey towards commercialization. And we want to be the first place you go for outside capital. And there are lots of feeder systems to this, right? Just look at the MIT community that we have. There are an incredible number of very important entrepreneurial programs. We will look there for ideas and entrepreneurs, as well as at other programs in the region that we think are also doing a very good job. But the first checks we're going to write are probably going to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then work with companies to the next milestone. And over the late spring, early summer, we'll probably make our first investments. So.
Thank you, Katie.
Was that specific enough?
I think that's great.
Okay, great.
And if not, she said she would stay 2 hours.
Or until my voice goes.
No, I think just to maybe provide some context, I do think you should recognize we're kind of getting started with this. We really want to make sure that we hear also from you in all of these. But I think that the timing and the sense of timing is an important one that Katie provided to you. Maybe over to you, Anantha. Can you tell us a little bit more about these working groups that you're leading here at MIT, and what are they designed to do?
Right. So we have about 60 members of the MIT community, focusing on 5 different areas. The first one is access to MIT facilities. So if you're an entrepreneur, part of the engine, and you want to access facilities on campus, streamlining and expediting intellectual property through the Technology Licensing Office. I think that's something that we're focusing on. conflict of interest issues. So if you're students and you're interested in starting a company as a student, really thinking about ways that we can enable this and managing conflict of interest issues. Helping our students and the MIT community think about visa issues and visa options. And finally, there's a lot of activity on campus through the Innovation Initiative and various other innovation programs, and really thinking about coordinating these activities and really helping our students and postdocs and community think about startups and helping form their ideas on campus. So this is really the 5 committees. We have many ways that we collect input. One of them is an idea bank, which is still open, so you can provide your inputs through the idea bank. That's one way, or you can talk to one of the leaders of the 5 committees.
Thank you, Anantha. So Katie, you already told us about timing and a sense of the first check sizes maybe. Tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about how long the companies may be engaged with the engine.
So I don't think there's a minimum amount of time, but I can't imagine it would be possible to get through a significant milestone in less than 3 months. And then, but someone's going to prove me wrong, which will be great. But I also think there'll be companies that need much longer than that to get through some significant milestones. So we're not set up to have a time limit, but I think 3 months to a year-ish will be the average time. But there could be companies that need more time than that we think are very promising, and we don't want to have a limit necessarily. Now, I don't think you're going to be in the engine for 5 years. I think that is too long. But I think some things could take 18 months, 24 months until they're really ready. And the longer it takes, the bigger the idea usually is, or should be. But I'm not afraid of working on a really hard project that has 2 or 3 big milestones before it's quote unquote venture investable. I think that's going to be very real, and many people will need that kind of time, but not everyone.
Thanks. Anantha, you've mentioned the facilities and the group that's working on facilities, and I know that you and Kathleen Kennedy, sitting here in the first row, have been working with other institutions to participate in what we're calling the engine room. Can you tell us what the engine room is about and what we expect to accomplish?
Absolutely, and you heard a little bit from Katie. It's really an exciting concept which brings together specialized equipment in this area and beyond, access to domain experts. So if you want an expert who knows how to take a biomedical product through the FDA process, or specialized services. And really we're thinking about equipment in multiple ways. In the engine headquarters, there will be equipment, so basic equipment for the startups. But we're also partnering with a number of companies. As you just mentioned, Kathleen has been central in helping make connection to companies around the area so we can access specialized equipment. But also we are opening up some of the MIT facilities. So there is one of the working groups looking at what facilities we can actually make available. And they're right now thinking about a multi-phase approach. In phase 1, we might make some of our bigger labs, like the Microsystems Technology Lab that does nano and microfabrication. So that lab might be available. And then we'll think about a phased approach to make more specialized equipment available. So it's really a very exciting concept. It'll help. Rather than spending time focusing on setting up your own equipment, you can think about access to the engine room and get to product very quickly.
For that, I should thank personally Robin Elises down there and Oliver Thomas here have been instrumental, as well as Sean Adams there, in creating a working prototype for that engine room and making sure that that system exists. So with that, I would open up the floor. Anyone who has a question, please come up to the mics. As I said, state your name and organization, and we'll go from there.
Hi, I'm AJ Perez, MECI. How do you guys balance the fiduciary responsibilities to the LPs with the honest brokerage policies that MIT has?
So let me take a step.
Yeah, why don't you start with that one? I was like,
As a fiduciary to
Israel?
both MIT and the engine. So I think the reason, and perhaps what it didn't really come across this way, but we stated fairly clearly when we launched on October 26, the engine is a separate entity, that it is outside of the MIT not-for-profit realm. So that's the way to balance it. The engine sits outside of the ecosystem of innovation at MIT, and that's the handoff that we're describing. So all of the ecosystem of programs that Anantha described, they are within the educational mission of MIT. The engine and all of its support, investment, et cetera, has a public mission, and it's designed to really be the public system for innovation, but it sits outside of the not-for-profit of MIT, and that's how we balance those two things. There will be an investment decision made by Katie and her team, completely separate and an arm's length from MIT.
Thank you.
Maybe I'm gonna go alternate one side.
Yeah, hi, Dana from MIT Sloan. Quick question, first of all, thanks for organizing this. Second, there's some of us who are interested in starting companies and taking funding from the engine, but there's also some of us who would be interested in working with the engine in other ways. Have you considered ways that other students that are perhaps, less technical might be able to be involved and help out with the engine?
Yeah, I'll start with that. I think there are many ways that students can be involved, and if you've ever been involved with a technical company, there are plenty of things that have to be done that aren't technical to make it work. And I think there'll be many opportunities both at the undergrad level and the grad level to come and help out the companies that are in the engine, or learn about investing, or learn about different ways that non-technical people can have impact. So I think there'll be many opportunities.
I can just add that I think we're thinking about many events, engine events, that could include workshops that will be held on campus for the benefit of students. Also thinking about how students can be engaged with the engine, thinking about internships. And in fact, even one of our groups is looking at innovative models where you could perhaps do your master's thesis as a part of a startup. So we're looking at various options, and all of that is on the table. So we'd love to hear from you as a part of the working groups.
Thank you.
Hi, Mike Stanley from Transit X. It seems like there's a bias towards being sort of a feeder system for the venture capital community rather than sort of a bootstrap or other things. I wanted to see if there was sort of the...
Unintentional.
Okay.
I think there are many ways to grow a company. It could be with joint development agreements. It could be that you actually have customers, novel thought. And there are many other sources beyond venture capital to fund your company. And I think we are open to all of those. We're not sending anybody down the chute. You must take venture capital. I don't believe that at all. I think it depends on what the founders want, what the right thing for that kind of company is. That's why I say everybody's different. And one of the things about the network that we'll create is that it will include all the different paths that you could take to grow a company.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Katie, one of the things that has come up, am I allowed to ask questions?
Of course, Professor.
Oh, no.
But no, I think in talking to students, a lot of our students are interested in social entrepreneurship, and how do you think about those kinds of companies?
So impact investing and social entrepreneurship are really tough things because they mean something different to almost everybody. And we will have a fiduciary responsibility to our LPs to invest money and make money, right? So we're not funding things that we don't believe will become businesses and large impactful businesses. But I also strongly believe that many of the businesses we will create will have a big social impact. So it just depends on how you parse that word.
Hi, I'm Dan Blank. I'm working on a startup called Toggle. I'm really interested in how, as a founder, I might be able to hook into the MIT community and find out, what students or faculty are really excited about in their research, in the hopes that maybe there's somebody out there who's working on, the exact issue that I have in my company, and they've already got a breakthrough I just don't know about.
So I think that that's a great question. There's a lot of startup programs. If you think inside MIT, there's the Delta V Accelerator and the Martin Trust Center, the Sandbox Funding, Start MIT, and Translational Fellows, and many more programs which really bring together different students interested in both the technical and the business side of startups. So I would say getting involved in those is one way, but we're also thinking about ways that we could create mixer events that would bring students who are interested in entrepreneurship together. So please come and talk to us. That would be a great suggestion also for the MIT Innovation Ecosystem group that's looking at this. Please fill out the online idea bank. You can fill out your idea.
I think when Katie talked about the founding community, and I think she stressed so much this community aspect, I think that's why we believe that regionally we can make a very significant impact connecting individuals that share similar problems or actually opportunities.
Thank you for the invitation, Katie. My name is Javed Sultan. I'm president of a nonprofit, SARID. And the question I have is, one of the best things we have is the intellectual capital as MIT graduates, and we have the possibility of changing societies. And sometimes a large portion of society doesn't have the money to give to investors. So my question is, when you're evaluating, and of course, we're hoping that we'll get some funding, but when you're evaluating between the tangible and the non-tangible, between, say, return of the dollar to the LP, and looking at the intangible benefits of, say, climate change or societal change, how do you bring about a nexus? How do you build a synergy to be able to effectively take a decision for the thing that Rafael Reif has talked about? We are interested in societal change. We are interested in improving the society. How do you take that decision?
I mean, that is probably the most difficult question you could ask. I mean, there is no answer. And I think there's some famous movie line about it's complicated. And we're going to have to, I think there is a balance for knowing what will make money today and what will make a huge impact later and could be a substantial business.
Well, last, maybe you can create an index, like Bhutan has a happiness index.
Yes.
Somebody else says,
Yes.
maybe you create your own index by which you evaluate.
That would be lovely.
So
Yes.
what I would add to Katie's answer, and I think for you, which I gather you are an MIT grad, right?
Yes.
I think MIT's greatest impact to the world is through MIT grads, right? And I consider one of myself, and there are many, I'm sure, in the room. And I think that is the biggest societal impact, and I think how we're doing that. And I think recognizing we all work very closely with the president, this is not a one single bullet solution, and the engine is designed to do what Katie explained you to do, which is to try to bridge a gap that today exists for certain companies, and we need to make sure that that is a financially sustainable endeavor, but at the same time impactful endeavor. There are other I would say, mission impacts that MIT is very committed to, and the creation of those indices and others. In fact, the Innovation Initiative and other units at MIT have been looking into how we create different types of metrics that could potentially change and guide the world in a different way. I'd say the engine is not just the solution to every problem that society has, but I'll take this one for you, Katie. But I think it is designed to do a very big impact into a problem that we all in the community at MIT feel it's very apparent and something that we feel we can solve.
Thanks. I'm a director of Nihon Koden Innovation Center, but actually the question is not my day job, it's my non-paying job. I also mentor 4 Mass Challenge teams, hopefully pick up another 2 this year. They're all doing medical devices, hard science, hard engineering. And my question is, they've aged out of Mass Challenge. My question is, should I encourage them to look at the engine as a place where they can continue in that same theme of getting mentorship and getting support? They're not yet at the stage, they're early stage, they're not at the stage of looking for VC funds. And along the same lines, the only thing I'd also say is I'd encourage you to look at the Mass Challenge mechanism for finding mentors, because they've actually have a great system. So.
I would encourage them to come and talk to us. I think there are a lot of great things coming out of Mass Challenge, as well as a bunch of the other accelerators around and co-working spaces. So I think there may be a home for people, there may not. But I would definitely encourage them to come and talk to us. Yeah. Especially in the areas you're talking about, I think we may be very helpful.
Please.
Hi. You've used a few times the term hard tech to characterize the domain of interest. And I wondered if you could characterize what you mean by that. And more specifically, in one of your slides, you had a list of categories, and one of them was bio. There was a little asterisk under that said no pharma.
Yeah.
And I was curious what the logic was behind that, and if you could characterize your definition of that. Does that just mean not something that goes to clinical trials, or does it mean something else?
Okay, there's much we don't know yet, but here's what I do know. I think much of pharma or drug discovery is well served by a number of investors here in Boston. I put that in the category of much of software is also well served by current investors. We're looking at things that aren't as well served today, but are very interesting potential companies. So that's why I had a whole list of categories rather than one or two, because I think there's a bunch of stuff in all the areas I listed that we could be helpful with in terms of access to the right experts and the right equipment to develop those things at lower cost and higher velocity. I am not going to answer your question as specifically as you want, just so you know, because I think we have yet to learn exactly the exact targets. And I'm more interested in learning what the entrepreneurs want to bring forward, and if we can be helpful, and if we think they're good investments, than me specifically defining what is hard tech. But I would say there's some easy ways to think about this. It's probably not something you can develop on your laptop alone in a weekend. Okay? It's probably something that will involve either really deep software algorithms or some kind of something physical, and those things are harder. And so that's the kind of areas we're exploring, which includes many forms of bio, clean energy, advanced manufacturing, robotics. Like there's a lot of areas, medical device, that aren't as well served by the current investors.
So fundamentally, one might make an argument of why their thing doesn't fit in with the current scheme of the world outside the engine.
Say that again?
One might make the argument of why their project doesn't fit into the categories of the existing ecosystems, why it's not in a category that's well served elsewhere.
I think the best argument to make is, why is this important to develop? Why are you the team to do it? And what are the milestones you could reach in the near term that would make everybody jump up and down and say, that is going to be a great company. It might take 5 years, but that one is going to be awesome. And we've taken out a bunch of risk over a period of time, and there's an incredible team, and the impact to the world is huge. And it will be a sustainable business.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. Hi. And so this question actually is complementary.
Can you state your name and
Oh, sorry.
affiliation?
I'm Othman. Hi, and I'm currently at MIT in technology and policy. And so I remember a few minutes ago you talked about one of the ways that you could support MIT students would be by using their master's thesis as a basis for their startups. That's exactly what I want to do, but I've had a lot of issues just navigating through the rigidness of the academic structure. And so my question is, how will you reconcile the rigidness and the lack of flexibility in general of the academic structure and the discipline base and funding and whatnot with the flexibility that you're seeking in the engine?
I think this is a great question. And in fact, this is the topic that's being discussed by the innovation ecosystem and actually a couple of other committees. We actually have a model today. For example, in EECS, we have the 6A master's thesis program where you end up doing your thesis work at a company for a summer plus a semester. So there are models out there and ways that we can deal with intellectual property. So we are trying to look at various models that work and try to adapt and also create new ones. So I think that's the exciting part here, is that we are trying to create new models for technology licensing. We have the TLO director here, Leslie. We're looking at ways that we could allow students more flexibility so that they could spend time thinking about startups and so on. So that's all being discussed at this point. In fact, we're going to have another community forum specifically geared towards those working groups. I believe it's March 22nd evening, so please come and take a listen to the ideas that are generated.
Thank you.
Bob Mumgard, Plasma Science and Fusion Center. So you've got a really nice, compelling package here, but I have a question about the specific parts of it individually. So there's already mechanisms to interact with the domain experts and facilities at MIT through things like sponsored research. However, they carry some added burden that can be difficult for early stage startups, including startups that might fall past where the engine sits or even before where the engine sits. Do you have any idea on whether or not the things you're going to innovate that are going to be available to companies that take the full package might be available to companies that only need a part of that package, say don't need the funding or the space, but would like to have a more streamlined conflict of interest or a more streamlined sponsored research agreement?
So I think a part of what we're trying to do is we're using the engine as a way to create these templates, but in fact, we absolutely believe that these are going to be more broadly applicable. So a lot of the work that's going on is going to be useful across the board. So.
It's a great forcing function to talk about a lot of things, yeah.
Hi. Hi. My name's David. I'm a founder with Mining Exploration Technologies. My question is, you've managed to attract a lot of people to this room, and you've talked about this magic of founders pushing, interacting. Is there going to be a way where we can find out who's here? Is there going to be some sort of, I don't know, I mean, Facebook, but for the people in the room? How do we find out who's here?
That's a great question. I mean, I would suggest talking to a few people.
Sure.
I mean, I'm going to be here a few hours. You should too.
And you mentioned an ideas bank that you could submit ideas to. Where is that? What do you mean? What is it on the
Talk
website?
to us afterwards. It's actually available online through the MIT.
It's an MIT.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talk to us offline, and we'll give you the right address to submit your ideas.
Okay. Thank you very much.
But also on the engine site, there is a way to email us and give suggestions. So I also encourage you to do that.
I'm going to make one last call for 2 people that want to join these lines, and otherwise we'll close at the people that are standing right now. Okay, there's 1 and 2.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to you.
Hi, Dan Bogdanovic, founder. So when you talked about the engine, you were talking about a lot of technical support, but you should be providing one support which takes a lot of time from most of the founders, CFO and HR services. You really don't know what you're getting into, what compliance you have to do, what other documents you have to file. Even if you try to go through the online platforms, you're falling into this category, or you're too small to us. It's literally like that. And something that is a very important part, to support, because it literally takes hours and hours and days in order, to do all of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I agree.
And that's been, I think, if you've assisted to previous presentations, we've flagged those business services very much. I think you can talk to the MBA Sloan person that asked the question. Please. please.
Hi, I'm Jay Ravi from Semlex Technologies. There was briefly mentioned the resources through the engine. You showed a diagram at Massachusetts Avenue that's being built. So are these kinds of resources open only to companies which apply to and get funding through the engine, or to others as well?
I think initially it would be the companies that are supported by the engine, and maybe in the future you can think about expanding this, but right now I'd say for the companies in the engine.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Paul from HBS. So if you do decide to invest, can you talk about the deal structure you have in mind? Are you going to have a standard model, or it's more of a case by case?
It's a great question. I think it'll be case by case, but we'll have some typical structures that we think are good for both the entrepreneur and for the investor. That's generally what I like to do, and we don't have this set in stone yet, but generally I'd like to have a deal, and there's some parts that you can move about that. But then all the founders know everybody has basically the same structure of a deal. And then we can talk about it openly, about what that deal looks like. I think it's transparent and basically the best way to deal with early stage companies. So we're in the midst of working that out, but it'll be something like that. Yeah.
Hi, Kirill Vidimcha, a PhD student in Core 6 and also co-founder of a startup that's working on commercializing technology that was developed at MIT. So actually a follow-up question to that. I was curious about the logistics of the actual funding and how it works. So two sub-questions closely related. One is, do you have a target percentage of equity stake you want to take as part of this first check that you're going to write? A range or something? We can get an idea of the essentially evaluation that these startups can get with this first check?
I don't yet, but I think typically very few investors take less than 5%. It almost doesn't matter at that point, and very few would want to take more than 20% because that's not good for the founders. So it's in that range, but it's going to depend on the check size and what you need, and I don't think it's set in stone.
Okay, and the other quick question is, in order to be part of the engine, is it required to be in the space?
I will definitely, I'm not in the business of chaining people to desks. So on the other hand, I think it will be really important to be close. I think there'll be a lot of things that go on that will be important for founders to be there for. And, but over time, of course not. You're going to grow a company that will have many more people than we could even accommodate at the engine. But I think for a time period, it's probably better if people are there, but it'll be a case-by-case basis. It may not make sense for some people.
Got it. Thank you.
Please.
Hi, Colin Sullivan, Chief Operating Officer of Risk Incorporated. So this question doesn't actually really pertain to our situation, but it might pertain to others in the room. We're a Northeastern spinout, and I actually worked in tech transfer at Yale University, and one of the programs that we had in place was this emerging entrepreneurial program, where we set MBAs up with technologies that were filed through the patent office. Is that something that you are considering on doing? And I think the engine would be a great vehicle for that type of program.
As I alluded to before, but I'll be more specific, I think there will be many ways that current MIT students, maybe from MBA programs and other programs, can be involved to work with some of the companies that we're going to have at the engine. And I've done the same in the past with MBAs, but also people who are in different engineering programs that want experience and want to be helpful and also learn. I think we will have pathways for all of those things.
And this relates to the question someone had asked earlier, how do we bring the technology people with the business people? And we are looking at creative ways doing them on campus, but it would be wonderful to work with the engine to make those connections happen.
Thank you.
Hi, this is I'm Hyuk Jin So, Samsung Venture Capital. Really excited about this new fund because, as you know, these days a lot of VCs are moving away from hard technologies, which is a shame because companies like us really need it. But one of the challenges I think they face is that to do these hard technologies takes a lot of capital commitment, and they can't do it alone. And so, as you mentioned, Katie, you're looking to do JDAs, things like that, with big companies. But as you know, a lot of these big companies are only interested in doing these things when they have some sort of an advantage from working with you or other companies that are doing hard tech. And so they want some sort of a exclusivity or proprietary information or know-how. How do you manage this minefield of all these companies who want to do that with you? Because without them, it's hard to succeed. You can imagine next-gen EUV lithography technology to next-gen, solid polymer battery technology, so many different things. But a lot of these companies have multi-billion-dollar equipments and facilities that you will probably need to validate the scalability and so on. So they want something in return. How do you manage that?
It's a fantastic question that I don't have a crisp answer for yet. I think it's one of the big areas we have to go figure out. And I will tell you that this is, again, something I'll feel very protective of, is the founders. And so whatever we develop, we're going to want to create a system that is on the founder's side. And it's exactly questions like this, if you're a first-time founder, that are really tough to understand the trade-offs you're making if you sign an agreement. But I don't have we'll definitely do this. I don't know yet. But we will definitely work on things that we think are good for the founders, good for the company, and are a reasonable agreement with somebody like Samsung or any other large corporate that wants to work together.
I would encourage you to talk to Kathleen.
Yeah.
We
know each other too, which is awesome. Yes.
We have kind of examples of, I would say, companies of that scale that I think we're trying to develop a new model of innovation, if you're willing, which if you think about what happens on a pre-competitive stage and the opening up of specialized facilities like the ones you've mentioned to test scalability, testing, equipment, scale-up production, those are offered on and I would say at MIT, within MIT, even accessing the clean room facility has been the same thing, to really be able to define the IP protections for the company so that it really becomes a transaction that the engine room can do. But at the same time, it connects that company or MIT or others with the innovation community in a way that creates that value that Katie is talking about. But I think we're very interested in connecting. We have now several companies that are already working with us on developing those interactions. Last question.
Thanks, Israel, for making this amazing event happen tonight. And I'm Jake, and from a venture capital firm. So definitely clear the engine definition here is backing the early stage entrepreneurs, especially within this MIT environment. It looks like it's student based. And so for the early stage investment, so can you share also according to your Techstar experiences for this space, can you share a little perspectives on what's the key fundamental characteristics you are looking for the funding team? So to make it a successful early stage, and especially for the high tech, because high tech means it has a lot of risks going forward to bring to a product or bring to the business success. And also to evaluate the early stage team, a lot of people are arguing that is a freshman team or just grad university dropout team, like Facebook dropout, like that. They drop out to start up Facebook. So there's some argument happening like, is that a good team or a serial entrepreneur team a good? So there should be some, to judge which one is better, to select one, there's some trade-off happening. Also, can you please share a little perspective on that? Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing is I have a strict policy that I don't want anybody's mother against me. And so if that means you want to drop out of MIT to do this, we're going to have a conversation about, is your mother going to call me? It applies to fathers too. So I am not sitting here encouraging people to drop out of school. I value my education. I think this is an incredible place to go to school, so why would you do that? But if people are already going to do that, then and they want to start a venture and they're on their way, what do I look for? In a founding team, I don't really care if you've ever done this before or you haven't. I think it can go both ways, and there's a lot of research that it's not always serial entrepreneurs that win. Lots of first-time entrepreneurs win, like Mark Zuckerberg and all the other super famous people had never founded anything before. But I think there are some characteristics of teams that are really fundamental. And the first is that they really care about what they're doing. They didn't just, somebody didn't pass them the idea and they just said, oh yeah, that's good, I want to start a company. These are people who have deep passion about solving this problem, because more than anything, we know perseverance wins at the end in many, many, many situations. So I want to make sure people are in this, to win it for the long term. I want to know that they actually have an insight about what they're developing, and how did they develop that point of view? Like, what actually happened to get them to step off the entrepreneurial cliff and say, I really want to do this? That kind of founding passion and insight together are fundamental to being able to attract a great team and to really break through all the many walls that you're going to have to break through. So I look at that really carefully. And then I look at, how do people make decisions? How do they fight? How do they resolve a situation? Because it's that ability to wrestle through a hard problem and make a decision and then do it again and again and again that gives you the ability to create a great company. And so I like to understand how people do that. And I'd like to not just hear how you do it, but to witness it. And so when I make investment decisions, I try to make them in collaborative ways where we wrestle a problem together. And I watch how you do things. And there is no right way to resolve an argument. There are many wonderful ways, and there are some very destructive ways. Like, a lot of the research in entrepreneurship will tell you most of the reason people fail is human interaction problems. And so that is so important. It's as important as the scientific breakthrough, right? And so I look at both really carefully. But I think team is so fundamental to an investment decision. Otherwise, I would just hire a bunch of analysts who would tell me what the world's going to look like in 10 years, and I'd go found all the companies myself, right? Because then I would own more. That'd be great. But that's not what I believe in. I believe in backing people and teams of people that really care about something. And so, I don't know. I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's how I think about it. So.
Okay, so let me join me in thanking Katie and Anantha for the Q&A. And we're now going to open up the doors. We're going to spill over into the multipurpose room, and the event will run for another half an hour or so. Take into account you're 300. Katie's one. Anantha's here, myself, Kathleen, and others.